In Guilford, we're getting close to the time for the guest speaker. We're going to interrupt this listing going through the towns here to get our guest speaker on, and then we'll continue, and we're leaving off. We've finished Center Harbor, and we will continue with the alphabetical list. Skip, you want to do that
Sure.
afterwards? Okay. So our guest speaker, let's see, how's the time? Yes, we're 1 minute ahead of time. Our guest speaker has arrived, I believe. And I want to introduce Tim Baxter, who's a representative, state representative, and who is running for Congressional District 1. Right? So Tim, take it away. Now I have the gong here. The gong is normally used for 3 minutes for people to talk, but for our guest speaker, we don't use the gong unless you really go too long. So go ahead.
Well, I think it should be pointed out in Tim's favor here that he actually spoke to us, was it last month or the month before, and he was given 3 minutes and did a bang-up job, and he did it in less than 3 minutes.
Yep.
In fact, he did such a great job, we decided to invite him back to give us a full presentation, just like the other CD candidates.
I make a
Welcome
motion
back,
to
Tim.
suspend the gong for this presentation.
And the nice thing is Tim actually knows what that gong means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like if you need to give someone like the gong, they're probably not doing a good job.
Yes.
They're probably not going to get any votes.
That's
Right.
true.
But I want to thank you guys for having me. I want to thank you all for coming. My name is Tim Baxter, and I'm running for Congress to completely annihilate the swamp. We have to fire Chris Pappas because he's enabling everything that Joe Biden is doing to destroy our country. But I strongly believe that we can't replace Chris Pappas with a cookie-cutter establishment rhino. We need a real conservative fighter, and that's who I am. And I'm going to talk to you about what I've done to fight for you. Not cheap talk, but real action. I led the fight in Concord last spring against vaccine passports because no one should be discriminated against because of a medical decision. It's none of the politicians' damn business if you get a vaccine or not. Second, I led the fight this year for a full forensic audit of New Hampshire's 2020 election results.
Yes.
And we were talking about the machines earlier. You can just look at the former Democrat Secretary of State that said, a town in New Hampshire broke the law. This is a Democrat who's not a Trump guy. Of course we should audit our elections. I set up the bill, it was free for taxpayers. There was no legitimate reason for anyone, Republican or Democrat, to be against the bill. I strongly believe that every person, and really our whole country, deserves nothing less than full transparency with our election results. And that's why I was proud to lead the fight for election integrity when it comes to an audit. And then third, I'm leading the fight right now for mandatory E-Verify so we can punish and stop corporations from hiring illegal immigrants in this state. Obviously, I'm sure most of us are in agreement that illegal immigration is one of the major things destroying our country. One of the things I do is I run a small nonprofit, Second Chances. We help people struggling with addiction get into treatment programs. And I see it. The drugs coming over this border, the fentanyl, the heroin, it ends up in New Hampshire. It's why we have, it's a big contributor to why we have this massive opiate epidemic. Until we get tough on illegal immigration and we elect people that have zero tolerance for illegal immigration, we're never going to solve the opiate epidemic in this state, in this whole country. That's why I'm leading the fight right now against illegal immigration in this state. I 100% support term limits because we need to get rid of every single last corrupt career politician in this country. I'm the only candidate in this race to date that's had the guts to say publicly Fauci should be in prison for lying to the American public under oath.
Amen.
And as everyone knows, people don't get more conservative once they're in office. So if someone won't say it now, you should ask themselves, what are they going to do when they're elected? Excuse me. And then the third thing that I wanted to say, another major issue, is that I'm completely against critical race theory. It's a disgrace. Yeah, you can clap. It's disgusting. Your tax money's funding that hate. We need to completely defund it and stamp it out of our schools. As a lot of you know, there's 6 candidates. Tomorrow would be 7. Next month there'll probably be 8 or 9 or 10. And you've got to decide, who do you want to vote for? And one of the main things that separates me is I'm the only candidate in this race that's ever held elected office. And that matters because I have a voting record. I've voted on 1,000+ bills. So on every single issue, you can know exactly where I stand. And as I was saying before, lots of people, once they campaign, they say, I'm Mr. Conservative and I'm going to do this and that. But 9 times out of 10, once they get in office, they stab us in the back. I have the most conservative voting record of anyone to ever run for Congress in New Hampshire. I am a proven conservative fighter.
I'll clap.
I'm coughing. I don't sound like a fighter though, because I'm coughing away. And then I'm just going to give you a quick campaign update and then just tell you a little bit more about my background to end and take questions. We've raised over $500,000, so we are building the campaign and the infrastructure necessary to defeat Chris Pappas. I was just recently endorsed by the National Association for Gun Rights because I have a 100% pro-Second Amendment record. I was just recently endorsed by Senator Rand Paul because I'm a staunch supporter of medical freedom. And I'm proud to have more local endorsements from state lawmakers than the rest of the primary field combined. But at the end of the day, endorsements, money, that stuff matters, but you have to win every single vote. And I'm asking for your vote because I'm the only proven conservative fighter in this race. And then in terms of my background, as I told you, I run a small nonprofit in my community. I'm a state rep, but I'm also a business owner. I have a real estate business. I restore and renovate multifamily properties. And I think we need people to have common sense in our government. And when I run my business and then I vote on stuff in Concord, and when you're dealing with bureaucrats and they're trying to tell you that the speed of government is the speed of business or society, you can sniff right through that BS. That's the type of background, one of the skill sets I bring, which I don't think there's anyone else that's a business owner, to my understanding, that's in this race as well. And the last thing I'll say is I first got involved in the community not because of politics, but because of my brother with disabilities. And he lives in a group home, and it was almost forced to close down. And it was not a political thing. It shouldn't have been, at least. It was just a terrible situation. And other members with disabilities in that group home, there's 12 people that don't have family members, they were at risk of going into the foster care system. Just a horrible situation. So I got involved, and I raised some money to help my brother and help keep the whole group home afloat, especially for those that were really at risk of going into the foster care system. And I saw politicians, Maggie Hassan, other folks in New Hampshire, that didn't care at all. It wasn't a political thing. They just didn't want to take the time out of their day. Not them, not even a low-end staffer, to get involved to make a difference. And that lit a fire under me. It woke me up. And that's why I got involved in politics, to try to stop and fight back against corrupt politicians. And now we see everything going on in our country. It is being ripped apart. We're losing our country. We're moving towards a socialist country. And I strongly believe that if we don't change what's going on in our country right now, we're going to lose our country forever. And that's why I'm running for Congress.
got some questions and answers, Q&A. People with questions. Someone raise hands, stand up, ask a question.
What would you propose for term limits for a federal House of Representatives and Senate?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about corruption because term limits is part of the solution, but there's so much that needs to be done. I think 6 years in the House and 2 terms in the Senate is more than enough, in my opinion. I would much rather have lower than longer. I've heard, 12 years in the House and 18 years. That's 3 decades. I think if you can't be effective in 12 years, it's probably ready. You probably should move on. But if we just term limit Congress, that won't fix the problem. We need to term limit the bureaucracy. We need to term limit the staffers. A lot of these members of Congress, they don't even read the bills at all. It's the staffers that make the decisions. The bureaucracy is called the fourth branch of government. Most laws are written not by members of Congress, but by the bureaucracy, which is not how the Constitution is supposed to operate, obviously, but it does. And then maybe the worst corruption issue of all is the way Congress runs. So in New Hampshire, every single rep you elect matters. Any rep can propose any bill. Any rep can propose any amendment. If you get 10 reps, which is very easy because we have 400, you can get a roll call so we can know, the whole public can know how your reps are voting. You can go and look and see which reps voted against vaccine passports or against the forensic audit. In DC, it doesn't work like any of that. It runs like a mob. The speaker controls everything. There's no votes, there's no amendments unless the speaker approves it. But here's the thing a lot of people don't know. Who changed that? It was a Republican. It was Paul Ryan. And here's the thing though. Paul Ryan had to get the majority of the Republicans in Congress in 2018 to agree to shift it to basically where it's operating like a mob. And you know what he told them? It'll be great. There'll be no tough votes. If it's a tough vote that's controversial, they might run an ad against you. We won't vote on it. It will only be easy stuff. And so they went along. That's what's messed up with our process. But until we have people that call it out, it's not going to change.
Any other questions? Question back here.
Yes.
Good to see you, Doug.
Nice to see you too. So I'm really confused and concerned about what's going on with Ukraine. I'm confused and concerned because I see Democrats that seemingly want World War III, but I also see Republicans that seemingly want World War III as well.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to your thoughts on the situation. I know it's convoluted and
Yeah.
so.
There's a couple of things. It's a very tricky situation. I think the most important thing for policymakers should be to prevent a nuclear war. That's the most important thing. We need to start with that perspective. I think the second thing that's important to point out, and I don't see a lot of people asking this question, why is Putin doing what he's doing right now? He's been in power for decades. I think he's doing it because he sees weakness. He sees an America Last energy policy. He sees Biden, who's woefully inadequate to lead the country. He needs to be impeached for a litany of reasons. And so that's why Putin's a shark. He smells blood in the water and he's circling. And so that's literally what's going on here. I'm worried that until we get different leadership, that we might go further into a really, really bad situation. I think all of us here feel terrible for the people of Ukraine, but we need to make sure that whatever we do is keeping America safe, first and foremost.
Tim, the de facto prevailing view, in my view, of the state GOP leadership is that conservative Republican cannot win a statewide office in New Hampshire. What do you say to those who espouse that view?
There's probably a lot of people that think that. I think if you give up on your values to get elected to something, then you already lose. And that's part of the problem. I think you run a good campaign, you always stay true to your values, and if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. We've raised $500,000. We've got tons of support, and we'll take the case to the people.
Do you think you can win?
I absolutely do think I can win. And I wouldn't do this if I didn't think I could. And I think there's a lot of people that respect authenticity. There's a lot of independents in this state that are not far left, and they are not as conservative as us. But they will vote for people that are genuine, that aren't corrupt, that will stick to their values. They won't agree with me or us on everything, but they see that out of control spending with $30+ trillion in debt, that's why we have massive inflation, the 1.9 million illegal immigrants that entered our border in 2021, and they'll say, you know what, Tim might be too pro-life for me or too pro-this, but I will vote for him because he has common sense. And Chris Pappas has failed us and lied to us. He said that he'd be a moderate, and he's just gone with the Democrat agenda every step of the way. I'm doing it the opposite way. I'm telling people I'm a conservative fighter. So if I do get elected, when I come back to you in 2 years and my voting record is very conservative, I said that's what I told you I'd do. So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear from you on the issue that it's affecting everybody in this room, and everybody in this room knows the cause of it, but fuel prices. I mean, I met with a family, a young family that literally told me that they were conflicted. They're on a fixed income. They have to choose between heating their home or buying groceries.
Yeah.
We know what caused it. It's not COVID, it's not Putin. But what do you propose to do about it? It's almost unsustainable for young families nowadays.
So I think there's two main things. It's this reckless spending, which is the chief thing that's causing a lot of the inflation. And then second, excuse me, it's our America Last energy policies. When you have a government that says we're going to shut down drilling on federal lands, we're not going to embrace nuclear energy, we're not going to have the Keystone Pipeline, and we're going to try to just have these frivolous green energy regulations from the EPA, right? They have an ideological left-wing agenda of only solar and wind. Nuclear has no CO2 emissions, but yet they hate it. It's not even logical. But then the other thing, I talked about election integrity and vaccine passports. There's a lot of Republicans, they're only good for cutting taxes, and that's it. They're not even good for cutting spending. And if you don't cut spending, you have to raise taxes down the road, or if you don't do that, you get massive inflation if you print money. That's what's happened in Congress, right? The Federal Reserve's balance sheet in 2 years went from 4.2 trillion to almost 9 trillion. The US government's printed more money in the last 2 years than any government ever. That's the big reason why we have inflation. We need people that are going to vote to cut spending. And last thing before you ask a follow-up, we just voted, we being the US Congress, on a $1.5 trillion spending bill today that was published. It's over 2,000 pages long. It was published at 2 a.m. That's when it was made public. And most members of Congress and most Republicans voted for it.
Mark?
You want to ask a follow-up, sir?
Yeah, just would you support or a federal fuel tax holiday? It's only 18 cents per gallon, which equates to yesterday's increase.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'd support that for New Hampshire. New Hampshire's going to have about a $500 million surplus.
New Hampshire's 24 cents on gasoline, and federal is 18 cents.
Yeah, no, I think we should. I think we absolutely should do that. I think it's better to try to get permanent tax cuts if possible, but absolutely, I'd support that.
Thank you.
Mark?
We have a structural issue in Congress, in the House of Representatives. When the Constitution was written, we had one representative for every 30,000 people in the country. The Constitution specifies that we do a census every 10 years, and until 1850, the number of representatives was set based on the 30,000 people to be represented by each representative. From there, we got up to about 1910, and then we stopped following that rule. In 1850, we upped the number of people to be represented to about 60,000, and in 1910, we decided we were going to cap total representation at 435 members. The issue, the question I'm getting to is, when we had the first 150 years, we had a very small number of people compared to what we have today, represented by each member of the House of Representatives. 60,000 people for one representative gets you very different representation than 760,000 people for one representative. Should we go back to the structure that we had when the country was founded? Should we go back to the constitutional way that we originally had? Should we pick?
It's hard to see it being a lot worse than what we have now, that's for sure. You know, you're talking about 4,000 people in Congress, but people say the way New Hampshire works is lunacy. We've got 400 reps. It's one for about every like 3,500 or so, roughly. And I think that's a great system. I'll tell you about my day today. I made 190 or so cold calls, calling people around the country and in New Hampshire to ask for money. Because you represent 700,000 people, you can't possibly meet them all and talk to them, so you have to raise $1 million and spend it all. It's a crazy system. It shouldn't operate that way. And as you said, it was never intended to. So, you know, I doubt we'll get a point when members of Congress are willing to reduce their power and dilute themselves, where there's, you know, they get to say they're one of 435 members of Congress. Look at me. But yeah, I think if we have more representation where the public has a better ability to know and follow up with their member of Congress, I think that's a good thing. Where do you want to
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll
Here.
go ahead.
As a veteran, I wanted to ask you a couple questions that maybe you could confront Mr. Pappas about. I'm sick and tired of him talking about how he helps the veterans, and we're the only state in the union that doesn't have a full service hospital, VA hospital. What the hell is he doing? Where's he been? And especially Maggie Hassan, you know, she's got all these commercials with the veterans and this. Yeah, where is she? And the last thing, going back to the fuel, two things. That's a two-parter. It is my understanding that the state of New Hampshire does not have a law against price gouging with gasoline. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that. And then the second thing, when I travel from Laconia to White River Junction, because I have to see a specialist at that VA hospital, which is fine, and I have to pay the gasoline for that, I have to wait over 6 months to get reimbursed for the gasoline. The same with the Manchester VA, you know. And the thing is, with the gas going up to the prices that it's going up to, you know, I can't wait that long. And I just wonder what the hell is going on at the VA hospitals when you call them up or you call the representative there that handles it. Oh, well, we're understaffed. We have to COVID and all of this, you know. Well, that doesn't do me any good, you know. Why don't you get more staff and get the gasoline paid? The way it used to work before all this bullshit was the fact that you would go in the day that you had your appointment, fill out the voucher, put it in, the next week you get your paycheck. I mean, your travel reimbursement, you know. So what the hell's going on there? Especially now when vets really need, you know, that treatment, number one. And number two, the only place I could go was White River Junction. Now, if I have to go over to the Tilton clinic, that's fine, you know, but not when I have to travel that distance and put gas and wear and tear on my car. So, would you be willing to sign an affidavit that you would work hard to get as a CD as well as what, you know, the position you're in now, that you would push to get a VA hospital for the state of New Hampshire, full service VA?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that jump out with what you said. I'm definitely going to answer that specific question. Members of Congress are given about a $3 to $5 million, depending on their seniority and their committee assignments, as a budget. And they can do three things with it. One, they can spend it on staff to make sure they're analyzing bills, legitimate function. Two, they can spend it on constituent services, which is very important because if you're having an issue like that. And then three, which is what most members of Congress prioritize, is they can use taxpayer money that's allocated towards them to fund their campaign, send out ads. Chris Pappas has used taxpayer money to fund mailers, to fund Facebook ads. That's legal. But that money is going from money that could be used on constituent services to help you and other folks with real problems. That's something, taxpayer money on campaign ads, I'll never do that. So that's part of the problem. The second thing that jumps out is we have a $30 trillion national debt, we spend over $4 trillion a year, and we don't even fund things that we truly need the most, like veteran care, right? We're in all these endless wars, and President Trump said a great nation can't fight endless wars, but then we don't take care of our veterans. We're gonna send $14 billion to Ukraine, but we have 500,000 homeless veterans in this country. So we need to be conservative and fix the priorities that are most important. When it comes to veteran care specifically, I think that we need to invest money in that and cut spending and prioritize that. So that means that veterans should have a voucher. They should be able to go to the VA hospital or any hospital of their choosing. Obamacare, you saw all these concentration of networks, people losing their plan. The VA has been a mess for a while. But yeah, New Hampshire should have a VA hospital. Veterans should be able to use the VA system or the private system, and they need to be reimbursed. And that's going to take more money. And the way you do that is you need people that are serious about cutting spending virtually everywhere else.
I must say, to add to that, that when Trump put in the community care program, that the Manchester VA and the other VAs, they're doing well with that, But sometimes even with your community care, you still need some treatments at the hospital, and that's very important, especially some of the major surgeries.
Other questions, sir?
I'd be really interested in hearing about, number one, your nonprofit. Secondly, you talked about supply side of addiction, but how policies for dealing with, it sounds like the people you're dealing with, your nonprofit, policies for improving the lives and risks people addicted.
Yeah, so addiction is...
And how did you even get into that? I'm curious.
Sure, so addiction is a very complicated issue because there's no silver bullet. I wish there was. The fact that people feel like they're either mentally depressed, which we've seen COVID lockdowns dramatically escalate depression and suicide rates, alcohol, drug abuse, people that feel disconnected, people that feel like they have no true passion. You see a lot of middle-aged white men that have a much higher rate of addiction because in certain instances, especially rural communities, they're disconnected. Manufacturing's been hollowed out in a lot of these communities. It's hard for them to get a good, solid job that produces a living they need. And so you could talk about trade and all these policies, right, that go into it. What we do at Second Chances is we've helped 11 people that are struggling with addiction get into long-term treatment programs. So the longer they're there, and if they stick through a program 12 or 18 months, in our case that we help people get into, they are much more likely, if they stay through and complete the whole program, to get off of drugs and be clean. So that's what we do. But addiction, it's a very, very complicated problem. That's just the sad reality.
How do you propose, from a more policy, it's like you say, and it's not just an opioid thing, it's a much bigger issue than just opioids. These people tend to be stigmatized, they tend to be left to the recesses of society, and it's a reinforcing cycle. How do you propose using public policy to help improve the lives of these people?
Yeah, there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can make sure that we're not subsidizing sort of this radical handout of pharmaceutical drugs. We've seen, Big Pharma has had their way because they have so much lobbyists. We've got a pharma lobbyist in this race that's running for Congress. That's what's wrong with our political system is people, they become a lobbyist and then they run for Congress, or they run for Congress and then they use all those connections where they're supposed to be serving the public, and then after they leave Congress they make $1 million a year until they retire. That's what's wrong with our system. You have to restrict the supply, but then I do think the border is one of the biggest things. That's where the supply is coming from, and this sort of America Last policies in so many ways, the border, the prescription drugs, and then also the hollowing out of our middle class, right? I think we need to shift to an America First agenda. I think Trump won a lot of new voters because he was talking about solving these structural issues in our in our society.
Steve?
I'd like to ask you about cutting federal spending. Wouldn't you have to eliminate or cut back on a lot of the bureaus, agencies, departments? How do you go about that?
You would. That's absolutely right. You have to. That's the only way to do it. I think there's many departments that are unconstitutional. You look at the Department of Education. There's nowhere in the Constitution where the federal government should be running education.
How about CDC?
CDC, well, the CDC has been so politicized. You know, what they're doing, it's unbelievable. So certainly you could look at the CDC. There's many departments that have to be slashed or eliminated entirely.
Aren't about half of them redundant or overlapping? Can't we do something about that, or what would you do about that?
I think you're right. The problem is it's very different. You know, if someone runs for Congress saying this is their 12-point plan to cut taxes, or I can tell you which agencies I'm for cutting. The problem is the process works. They don't even have budgets. They just have continuing resolutions.
Yeah.
And most of the members of Congress vote for that crap. They just did it today. That you need people that are going to say they're never going to vote for a continuing resolution. They're going to go back to regular budgetary order, the way we do it in New Hampshire, and then start from there. And then you have to go through each agency and cut it. What they do is they say, okay, it's 2 a.m., we just gave you your bill, we're voting today, it's 2,700 pages. If you vote against it, you hate the troops, or you hate seniors. And that's what they say. And then most of the people in Congress follow it like sheep, and they vote for it.
Last couple of questions.
Yeah, hi, thank you. You talked about eliminating departments, and IRS is a big department, right? They got tens of thousands of agents out there. And there was talk, discussion like years ago about just having a flat tax. And I don't know if it could even be resurfaced, because I think the whole system is really unnecessary.
Yeah, I would absolutely support a flat tax. I think anything that's going to cut taxes is a good idea. It makes it simpler and flatter, less deductions. That's a good idea. So I'm absolutely for a flat tax.
Thank you.
There was one more back.
Thank you.
Dying up here.
In your opinion, what is the key to battling against CRT?
I think it's local is the honest answer. It's school boards. I think that's the number one answer.
All right, we're trying to get you some water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank you again.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
Croc TV.